GFL Grandpa Fight League. Oh, the draft. Oh my gosh. The graphics are just terrible.
There was one fighter where there's like a bulldog, then Shogun's like riding on a horse, and then they cut to Brendan Schaub, and he's like,
Diego, who's had a huge career and could be, you know, manipulated to like follow this guy who like has no MMA training. Diego, though, was kind of at a point in his career where he was pretty alone.
he had some very effective training styles, you know, one of them being chasing Diego around the octagon with a knife.
Him being a punching bag.
Be the heavy bag.
It's just sad. At least to me, it's real sad. He was kind of that like quirky guy on the show who was like doing yoga.
I just wish that he didn't open his wallet chakra.
Cause my mother told me as a child, boy, don't play around with fire, cause you might just end up getting burned. And I know the wicked never rest, so I always try my best, but there's some lessons hard for me to learn.
Let's go.
I do that to sync everything.
Oh, okay. I thought we were just clapping. I'm for excitement. I'm clapping for excitement.
No, you can clap for excitement too.
Golfers clap.
So what's going on?
Dude, we're here. We're doing amazing. I'm drinking your coffee, and it's making me wake up and not have brain fog.
Yeah, there you go.
Appreciate your coffee.
Got to get one of those espresso machines.
I already have one. You just haven't set it up
True.
yet.
You just haven't set it up yet. Those ones are
Brandon
actually...
has given me an espresso machine, and I have been not great about setting it up. So after this episode, I'm going to go home, and I vouch to set it up.
Well,
But
after
I'll
you
do it
have
myself.
this,
After
then-
I've had this, yes.
Yeah.
He is way better than the K-pot.
Well, those are just kind of like drip coffee, basically.
Yeah.
Like it's like regular coffee versus like these. I just like the consistency of it.
Yeah. Oh, it's way better.
And then since it's not very bitter, like I don't even put sweetener in mine.
Really?
I don't even feel like I really need it.
Yeah. No, it's very good.
I would much rather eat like fruit or something.
Right.
I mean, honey's pretty good too. Like if
Yeah.
I'm gonna put something in it, I'll put honey in it.
Right.
But when I don't have honey, then I'll just like do it without it and then just have fruit.
Usually if I drink regular coffee too on an empty stomach, don't feel great. Like this, I don't feel bad at all.
Really?
Yeah. I don't know why.
There is a lot less bitterness in it. I feel like.
Yeah.
Like the acidity's lower.
For sure. Yeah.
Just like
maybe
the way
that's
they
it.
do
Maybe that's it. Yeah.
I don't know if that's true. I don't know
Yeah.
if that's
Don't take our word. It's not scientifically proven, but
Don't quote me on it.
yeah.
So there's a lot of crazy stuff going on in the MMA world these days.
Always is. Right now, I think we got GFL coming up. The Global Fight League, they're having their show. I think it's going to be May 24th, May 25th. It's a 2-day event. And I think it's at the LA Auditorium. That's where I believe. Tickets aren't out yet, which kind of a red flag, in my opinion. If the tickets aren't out yet,
When's the event?
May 24th, May 25th.
Oh,
I
yeah,
believe.
dude, that's like barely like a little over a month out. Month and 3 weeks or
It's a
something.
Shrine Auditorium.
Oh, okay.
Shrine Auditorium.
I will say, like, it's so funny watching back those live streams of the draft.
Oh, the draft. Oh my gosh.
God, dude.
I kind of like, we were talking about this earlier. I like the concept that they went with, like as far as like the like superhero theme of like introducing the fighters as they're getting drafted, but the graphics are just terrible.
Yeah,
if they would have done it for real, I think it would look really cool.
Using AI for it just made it look corny.
Yeah.
Like I wonder if there's like some little like nuggets of information that we just don't understand.
Maybe
because there was one fighter where there was like a bulldog in the screen and he's like,
well, I didn't see that one.
And then
you know what fighter that was?
No.
Oh, okay. I was like, I thought that guy, I wouldn't want to be that guy. Like you're sitting there watching the draft, watching yourself get drafted. And then that's what pops up as your like, effect. You're like, dude, this is not good. This is not a good start.
Yeah. And then Shogun's like riding on a horse.
Oh yeah. I've seen that one. Yeah. Shogun riding on a horse.
And then they made Gustafsson look like he was Iron Man. Like he had like a big
I feel
thing
like
in
their facial expressions weren't like natural because it's AI.
Yeah.
But and they used some shitty AI. They should have used like the best AI they could have got their hands on, or should have done it for real. Because
it's definitely a lot better than some of the other ones I've seen though.
Yeah.
Like the way that they moved, it looked a little bit more normal.
Yeah.
Compared to like some of them, like it'll give them like 6 fingers or like like weird shit to their hands,
Right.
But yeah, that one's kind of it was so funny too. Like I'll have to show you the clip, but because they have Brendan Schaub doing the like announcing with some of the other guys.
I've seen that. Yeah.
And they like showed like that bulldog thing and then like Shogun riding on the horse and stuff. And then they cut to him and he's like,
he's like, well,
he's like, what?
This is not good. Brandon Schaub, you need to have a better poker face. All right. Remember who you're getting paid by. All right.
He was like, what the fuck was that, dude?
It's hard not to be honest, I think, with, even though you're working for them and you got a good opportunity, it's like they could have spent more time making it a lot better.
Yeah.
The product could have been better. I like the concept because it's not what the UFC does, and my biggest thing is they're trying to go with a team concept and it's already been done and it didn't work. IFL did it. It did not work. So they got to find something to make them different. And I feel like that was actually kind of a good idea. It just wasn't executed properly.
Yeah.
With the draft, because I like the superhero effect. If they could have gone like all different like Marvel superheroes, or they could have made it crazy and like actually had the fighters, that'd be sick. Like honestly, like really cool, but they just didn't execute.
I get like the whole idea behind it because the way that they're thinking about it, and this is the same issue that I've always seen, that not like an issue that the UFC has, but basically like when you think of like the NFL, for example, the teams have like a culture that lives on past the fight, like the people who play in the NFL, like the players and everything. For sure. So like
like the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, regardless.
No matter who's on that Philadelphia Eagles team, that's gonna be a rowdy team.
Yeah, go Birds, baby.
Go Birds, always. Yeah.
So it's like they're trying to like tap into that and make it more like kind of like a cultural thing where people, because it's like my dad watched football. Yeah. My grandpa watched football. Yeah. Like it's a part of the culture. Yeah. So they're trying to make it into a part of the culture, but I don't know if it works that way with fighters per se.
I think, they're definitely targeting, the avid sports fan who doesn't really watch fighting. That's what they're going towards when you're making a team concept. It's like, oh, teams, what is this? But you got to remember it's fighting, and in all pastimes, fighting has never really had that concept. You know what I mean? And so, you're branching into like something that has been tested and didn't work the first time. And I thought IFL did a pretty good job, because I still remember the IFL. I was really young.
Yeah.
It's where like you first met Roy Nelson. Roy Nelson was the IFL champ before
Big
he
Country?
ever. Yeah, Big Country.
Oh,
that's how I first realized who Big Country was the IFL. So, and like that's going back a long time. And I just think they threw a lot of money at that, and they're kind of doing the same thing with this. We'll see how long it goes. I just think unless you put up, and this has always been the blueprint for fighting, is you got to have a star. You got to have a star or a fight that has a good storyline behind it. And that's what's really going to bring the fans. Whether they're a fight fan, a real serious diehard fight fan, or a person who's just an avid sports fan who sees, oh, there's a fight on tonight, let me just tune in. You know what I mean? So I think it's kind of not set up for success, but I'm here for it because I'm excited to see the matchups. I like the card that they're putting on, even though a lot of the fighters are not in their prime. That's just honest. Like the average age is like late 30s. A lot of them are probably a little bit washed. They're out of their prime, but I do like the card.
Yeah. But honestly, like I don't think it's not the problem that they're out of their prime. It's that when you have a guy that's out of his prime fighting a bunch of young killers. True. That's the problem. True. So if you have a league that's just filled with nothing but people that are kind of like on the same level,
GFL Grandpa Fight League. That's what somebody made a meme about that, and I was like, oh, that's kind of true. Damn, there's no real good comeback to that. Like,
it's kind of like smart though, because I feel like where the PFL went wrong is they offered Francis a shit ton of money,
too much,
but he's like the only guy. Versus like if you have like a league of people that people want to root for, like look at Tony. Like Tony, he's lost like 6 fights in a row. Yeah, maybe might have been 7 with that last one.
Probably.
But everybody was still showing up to hear from that guy. Yeah, like they
everybody loves Tony. Yeah, yeah. I think PFL went wrong, and maybe it's not they've done things wrong. It could turn around, but I'll say they threw too much money at Francis, and they don't have anybody to put up against Francis that brings in the masses. Yeah, I think it's great. Francis has done a good job outside of MMA, going to boxing, fighting Tyson Fury, fighting Wilder. Or he didn't fight Wilder. He fought Anthony Joshua. Even though both of those fights didn't go his way, that's just a different crowd and audience that now he can bring to PFL. But they don't have anybody else to like get him to push that fight to the limelight where it's going to be a big fight. You know
Yeah.
what I mean? So I just think until they find another great dance partner, that fight, like, he's kind of useless. You know, they can throw him against less popular heavyweights, but it's never gonna it's not gonna generate, you know, big crowds or good income unless the fight is like, if the fight was in where's Ngannou from? He used to live in France.
Cameroon.
Hey, dude, if the fight's in Cameroon, okay, well, now you can put up numbers and seats. You can put asses in seats. But, or maybe in France, because that's where he originally started. That's where he moved after he was from Cameroon and then started training. But, like, if you're not going to have him fight there, you're not going to bring in big masses of people to watch him fight. That's just bottom line.
Yeah.
So I think that's where they went wrong. I mean, I'm excited to see, as far as back to the Global Fight League, I'm excited to see the card, because the card actually is stacked with people that everybody knows if you've watched the UFC. I just don't know if they have like a star. You know what I mean? And that's where I think they might go wrong. I think there's a couple guys that could have a resurgence and like be a star, like a Sage Northcutt. Like Sage is still young.
Oh, dude, he's
So young. He's so talented. He's got that it factor.
he's like G.I. Joe, dude.
Yeah,
like
he's literally the
looks-
G.I. Joe. Yeah.
He looks like a he looks like a
Cartoon
action,
character.
like an action figure.
Yeah, which makes it like any fight he's in, it's kind of already a spectacle. You know what I mean? Like he's one in a million. So I think they have some guys that could burst into the scene and like make them popular, but they got to market them the right way. They got to get them the right fights. Now that you have the team aspect, you can't really go back on like not making the right fights, because you're gonna have the teams like go against each other, and then like they have 2 guys per weight class at each weight, or they have 2 guys per weight class on each team. So when they go against each other, they're gonna be forced into like fights that maybe they're the right fights, but maybe they're not. You know, maybe it's the fights that the crowd doesn't want to see, or the fans don't want to see.
Yeah.
So I think the team aspect also kind of hinders the owners and like the league in general. When in fighting, UFC, there's no team league. They can make whatever fight they want, and it makes sense. And their concept's very simple.
Yeah.
And
That's why it's kind of interesting. I was doing some research on the whole boxing thing, because I feel like boxing gets the marketing aspect of it pretty good.
Yeah.
Like they sell like the top end fights pretty good, but
Right.
it is really interesting. Like when you see people are always like, oh, the boxers make so much more money than the UFC guys. But then I was like digging into like, dude, like they have to pay for everything.
Oh,
So it's kind of interesting. Like when you fight for a belt, for example, you pay a percentage of your purse to be able to fight for the belt.
Oh.
And then depending on how many belts you fight for, like if there's 2 belts on the line, then you got to double that to pay towards the commissions to be able to fight for a belt.
for their belt.
And then the promoter charges you a percentage of your purse. And like there's so many different like fees. So
Right.
like when you think about like all of like the crazy percentages, and then you tack tax on top of that, like
Yeah.
they're not making as much money as like the top line number that they say that they make.
And all the things that you just listed are everything other than their team. Think about then they got to pay their team. Like they got to pay their trainers, they got to pay their coaches. Who knows how much money they've thrown into the camp, you know? Like the guys are spending lots of money.
Yeah.
And so I think as the numbers in boxing at the top level are higher than the UFC, the overall majority, I think the masses of like boxers
Is way lower than the UFC.
way lower.
Way lower.
Way lower. Like if you're on an undercard, I mean, you can look at like a Jake Paul undercard. Those guys are getting paid like damn near nothing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? It's really the co-main and the main event that are getting the majority of the money on that card that the promoters are paying for, you know?
Yeah.
So that's, I think the UFC does a good job of like overall, like their cards, even the preliminaries, guys are getting paid. They're getting treated well, at least. Like, could they be getting paid more? Yeah, probably. But is it what they're worth? Probably not, you know, to get paid more. So I think Dana does a good job of like, you know, setting a reasonable number to pay their guys. I think the UFC does a good job of this because they've been around the longest. You know what I mean? Like they do have a blueprint that works. Like you might be like, oh, the fighter pay could be better. And I agree, it could be better. But like PFL's just throwing money at people and they're not going to last that long doing that.
Yeah.
And so I think the UFC's played the long game and they've played it well.
I'd be curious to see how many professional boxers they are, because I feel like when I was looking up the numbers, the base like salary average of like the lowest people in the UFC is like 160 grand a year.
Oh, okay.
Which is pretty good. Dude.
Pretty good.
Like there's some medical people that make about that, but like you're living pretty good if you make around that. You know, like you could afford a lot of different things. You know.
Yeah.
But there's like almost like 2,000 guys that are in the UFC.
Mm-hmm.
So, you know, it's like when you average that number out across all those people, then you're like, oh, so it kind of makes me wonder how many people do boxing.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Like if the numbers like around the same, but they make like 50% of that.
Right.
Know? And then also you got to pay, like when you go to an event, you pay for all your tickets, you pay for all of your lodging, like your hotels and stuff. If you're bringing the whole family, you got to buy hotels for everybody. Like that shit racks up.
Shit racks up quick, real quick. And I think, what point was I going to make? I think that now you see Dana and TKO. I think it's TKO Promotions. I think they're going into boxing business now. Yeah. And now they're going to start having boxing fights. I don't know. I think Dana's going to learn. Dana's going to learn that the UFC and boxing are a lot different.
Yeah.
Because I don't know if you saw it, but they leaked. I think something got leaked as far as like how much TKO and Dana are going to pay like the main fighters, like the guys that have the belt or fight for a belt, and it's like $750K. And like if you look at like the prime best boxers who are fighting like main events, they're fighting for a lot more money than that.
Yeah.
And so they're not going to, my thing is they're not going to be able to have those big time fighters on their cards, which maybe at first is probably the right move. You know, they're just starting their boxing promotion. They might have to have smaller names, you know, kind of rise up and build them up. But you're not going to have a Gervonta Davis on the first TKO card if you're trying to pay him $750,000.
Yeah, because
he's making way more than that.
Yeah,
so it'll be interesting to see Dana try to bring over the UFC blueprint to boxing and see how it works. I think Dana will learn that it's not necessarily the same, but I also think Dana will be able to adjust. And Dana's pretty successful in about everything he does, so I think he'll be able to adjust and be honest with himself. And I think it'll end up working out.
Yeah, I think this like multi-belt thing in weight classes kind of confuses a lot of people like me who didn't like grow up with boxing. Mm-hmm. So it's like you see this guy and you're like, oh wait, he's the champion at this weight class. Wait, this guy's also the champion.
This guy's WBC champ. This guy's the IBC champ.
Yeah. So if you had it all like under the same promotion, I feel like it would kind of sell the like, oh, like this guy's the champ of the world, you know?
Right.
Plus, it's also too like I think that's one of the things that they're banking on right now, where basically they're teaming up with Saudi Arabia.
Yeah.
And so like the tax incentives of doing stuff over there are pretty good. Like I don't know exactly how it would work being a United States citizen and then working over there, but the taxes are going to be way less because they don't charge tax over there.
Yeah.
So you're going to keep a lot more of your money just in general.
I got a feeling Dana's got the right friends over there where they'll do good business and the fighters will have good incentive to go over there and fight, even though maybe they won't even be making as much money as they could in a, you know, like a Eddie Hearn boxing match or a Bob Arum boxing match, but the incentives maybe win them over. And then they're like, you know what, I'll give this a try and see what happens. Yeah. And that might be their like ticket in the door to making like big fights happen. But we'll see. You know, I'm excited to see what happens with that. And then there's just so much going on now. I think, you know, BKFC, I think the rise of BKFC has kind of like changed things. As far as like, I think MMA guys going over and seeing MMA guys versus boxers on a more level playing field. I think BKFC is kind of that bridge. Yeah. To that.
Yeah, with like the dirty boxing and everything.
And I think ultimately people want to see a spectacle. I mean, me and you have talked about this before. Like people want to see like a circus show.
Yeah. They want to see Khabib versus McGregor.
Something like that. Exactly. Yeah. Exactly. And I think you get a lot of good matchups on a level playing field, and with something as violent as bare knuckle, people want to see that. Like people want to see big time MMA fighters fight big time boxers and want to see them get paid out. And I think they can with BKFC. And it just makes things more interesting. And it keeps a little bit more power to the fighters to be like, hey, like I do have other options. They might not be long term the better option, but the immediate, I could get paid more and better opportunities. So I think it helps them too. You know what I mean?
I kind of feel like, especially going back to like the boxing stuff with Dana.
Yeah.
I feel like with the UFC, he kind of went like the all-inclusive cruise kind of route where it's like, yeah, it costs a lot of money, or like you're not making as much money, but you get all of these incentives and you don't have to worry about shit. You can come to the PI, you can train, you got all these different like health stuff. You don't even have to think about it. You just show up and you can take advantage of all these different things.
Agreed.
So I feel like some people might be down for stuff like that, because at any point you can just be like, all right, screw it. Like you don't have to plan anything, and like you just show up, you know?
Right.
So I think that's like a good point of thinking, like it's a completely different kind of structure to the way that they set everything up. Mm-hmm. And I think it's really interesting to some people, and then some people are like, nah, I'd just rather have the money.
Of course. Yeah, I think you're going to get the fighters that they're not in this for the long haul, and they're not looking at it like the long game. You know, we all only have so much time to fight. You know what I mean? Like it's a small chapter in some of our lives, and some guys it's a bigger chapter. You know, some guys do 20 years of fighting, and that's a long career. You know, but you see a lot of guys, they don't fight more than like 5-6 years. You know what I mean? So I think there's certain people who are going to look at it like, hey, this is a money grab. I'm going to grab as much money as possible. And then other people are looking at it like, hey, this is my career. I'm going to be here for the long haul until the end. So let's play the long game. And I think with that comes like the incentives, the long-term incentives, like the PI, like doing things with the UFC, where the UFC now they're partner with Thorne. Now you can get supplement. If you're signed to the UFC, you can get free Thorne supplements. So like stuff, and like
they're the best.
And they're the best.
They're so
Thorne.
good.
Thorne, your supplements are the best. So I think things like that definitely attract the guys that are like, hey, like we're here. There's a lot of perks with this. I want to be here for a while. And I think Dana's like, okay, those are the people I want to work with. And that's why the UFC's been able to really take off. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And have a big roster of guys that have been there for a long time.
Yeah, definitely. So, like one of the guys who won the first Ultimate Fighter, Diego Sanchez.
Diego Sanchez, yes. Like Diego Sanchez. Diego, we were talking about this. Just Diego's career. Diego, I feel like Diego could have been like one of the best of all time. And it obviously didn't pan out that way, you know, in the end. But if you look at his like beginning fights, even his fight at the finale of Tough when he fights Kenny Florian, dude, he dominates. Like he didn't even work that hard. Even Dana and all the team were pissed that he finished the fight so quickly because of the TV time. They're like, oh my gosh, we have all this TV time we paid for, and Diego just beat up Kenny Florian in like a minute. You know what I mean? Like Diego was just so dominant at such a young age, and I think obviously the big thing with him and Joshua Fabia definitely kind of led to the end of his career being tarnished. And
yeah. You know what's so crazy is I was doing some research on him, and he's either tied with or he has the most fight of the year awards. Yeah. For some of the fights that he's had. Right. And he's one of 2 guys that's ever fought across 4 weight classes. And the only other guy is Kenny Florian.
Really?
Yeah. So it's kind of funny that it was both them when they both came through that same season, you know? Yeah. But man, like, could you imagine? So like with you, maybe like fight at 170, fight at 185, fight at 155.
I have to fight at 145 or 205, one or the other.
I feel like
I don't know which one I'm going up to, honestly, or down to.
205, you might die.
I mean, I think
against those guys that are just naturally that big. 145, you might die from the weight cut.
I'd rather die from the bigger guy. At least have the energy to try to fight off the bigger guy than die at the weight cut and try to fight, the smaller guy.
I just wonder how long that would take though, because not
for me to make 145.
Like 205.
To 205? I think
that would take a long time to put on that much size.
Yeah.
You're not putting on like 40 pounds in like.
But I'm also not walking around at 170 either.
Yeah.
I think it would be a lot easier for me to put the weight on and take the weight off. Like it would take me longer at least. Like I can get up to 205. It might not be an all muscle 205, but I could get up training, eating whatever I want 205.
You look like DC with the freaking chicken.
With the Popeyes chicken. If I got to get up to 205, I would be eating a lot of Popeyes chicken. So I think that would be the easier. If I had to pick a weight class, I'd go up to 205.
Yeah.
I wouldn't go down to 145.
You'd end up getting Dillashaw, I know.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. And that's why I went up to 170. It's like, I felt like half the time I showed up at 155, at 170, I know I'm going to show up. You know what I mean? I didn't care about being the smaller guy. At 55, I'd be the bigger guy, but I still would feel like shit. You know what I mean? Like I wouldn't feel great.
Even with day before weigh-ins?
Even with day before weigh-ins. Damn. And I was cutting weight don't get me wrong, I was cutting weight sometimes the wrong way. You know what I mean? Like I would, especially in the beginning of my career, like I just did not, I just didn't have a great weight cutting coach. I cut weight like a wrestler. You know, I would like be in the plastics 3 or 4 days before weigh-ins. I'd be like, dude, this is like starving myself. And I'm like, this sucks. Like I'd be in pain for like I'd probably be in pain for like 3 or 4 days. You know what I mean? Before the weigh-ins. And that's not how you're supposed to do it.
You just do it the day before?
Yeah. You're supposed to do it the day before, and you're supposed to you have, these different protocols that you follow, like drinking a lot of water, not eating carbs, not eating sodium. I didn't do that. I would be like, oh, I'm going to eat this, and I'm just going to starve myself the rest of the day. You know what I mean? And then I'm going to get in a sauna at plastics and try to run it off. And it was just a bad way of doing it. Of course, if I had a nutritionist and a real team and some real time, could I make 155? Yeah, I definitely could. Would I perform great? I don't know. But I know at 170, I'll perform no matter what. And I'll always make the weight.
Yeah.
So I was like, that's why that was my real decision maker of just going up to 170.
Yeah.
Yeah,
so. Definitely. You need a good weight cutting coach, and then hopefully not a training coach like Joshua Fabia.
No, definitely not like Joshua Fabia. For sure not. No. That whole scenario is just crazy to me. Like a guy like Diego, who's had a huge career and could be, manipulated to follow this guy who has no MMA training. He's like a self-awareness guru. And the guy must be such a good con man that he was able to get Diego to be buy in on what he was teaching. You know what I mean?
I could tell that he was into people like that, though, because they were asking him what was some of his motivation for the fight after he got out of the Ultimate Fighter and then he fought in the UFC. And he was like, "Oh, dude, Tony Robbins got me in the mindset for it." And I'm like, that's so funny to think. There's just some guy listening to a public speaker, and he's like, "Yeah, I'm gonna fuck this guy up."
Yeah.
It's not like the typical route that you hear for fighters.
Sure, definitely not. And I just think it's just crazy to me because, I've been doing this for a while, and I'm like, I don't think I would get manipulated to the point where I'd be listening to a guy like Joshua Fabia, but who knows? Diego Sanchez did. And I think Diego, though, was kind of at a point in his career where he was pretty alone and not in a good place when Fabia kind of came into the picture. I think Fabia came into the picture at the worst time for Diego. That's kind of what happened. I think that's why Diego ended up listening to him. Diego had already taken some losses, and I believe he had just gotten divorced from his high school sweetheart. And she had told him hey, you've lost I think he had lost 3 or 4 in a row, but in the last 12 fights he was 6-6 is the the thing that I read. And she was like, "Hey, you've taken enough damage, let's find an exit strategy to get you out of fighting." And he was like, "Oh, that's her not believing in me." And basically the relationship ended. And with that, the people at Jackson Wink weren't giving him as much attention, like Greg Jackson and those guys. They weren't giving him as much attention because he just wasn't as successful anymore. And I think with the combination of both of those things and just how his career was going, that kind of led to hey, I'm going to make a huge change, but not really knowing what kind of change he was signing up for. And that's when Fabia kind of came into the picture and, did what he did.
Yeah. He had some very effective training styles, one of them
that self-awareness taught him.
Yeah. One of them being chasing Diego around the octagon at the PI with a knife.
Not just chasing him and his training partners. Yeah, I got you.
Yeah, you can hold at the bottom.
Oh yeah, there we go.
That thing's a little stupid.
No, you're good. There we go.
That's like the craziest video though, because
Yeah.
I feel like when we look back at like a lot of these clips, like when it's just some dude like on the street like filming something, like no like crazy good camera, like it's so high quality.
Right. Yeah.
So you're like, oh, like
Well, I just can't believe like the PI staff would even let something like that happen. Like if I saw that and I was like a janitor, I'd be like, oh, I'm gonna say something to somebody. Like there's a guy chasing around fighters with a knife in the cage. Like I think this needs to stop. You know what I mean? And I just think, and I think you've probably seen the video of him being Diego hanging upside down. And him being a punching bag and saying like this is helping your conditioning and helping your head movement, which is clearly not.
He's just like kneeing him in the head,
Which is so
be the heavy bag.
which is like obviously initially is kind of like your initial thought is like what the hell, like kind of funny, but then it's like, dude, this guy's such a living legend, and for a guy like Fabia to even do that or think that's a great idea. And then for Diego to go along with it is just sad. You know what I mean? It's just sad. At least to me, it's real sad. And because Diego was like one of the first guys that I've watched, you know, growing up. So, and his fight with Clay Guida is probably one of the best fights I've ever seen, like on TV.
That was one of the Fight of the Year awards.
Yep. That was one of the Fight of the Year awards. And, you know, just to see a guy like that, you know, with it just was sad. It was just sad. And I think, I just think the whole situation was sad. I think it's interesting. The beginning of the end, I think for the whole Diego Fabia kind of like relationship was when Diego was going to have his retirement fight against Cerrone, which I was hyped for. I was so hyped to see like that was the way that they were going to end it, because both of those guys had never fought each other. And they were both in the same weight class for a long time, and they're both living legends. So I was like hyped for it. But, you know, Fabia already kind of had his hooks in, you know, with Diego, and was like, hey, like we're going to request the medical records. And then Fabia really thought he was going to sue the UFC and get like a big settlement check. And, you know, the UFC was like, we're not even going to let you fight if you're going to ask for the medical records and think you're going to do that, which is a smart move for the UFC. But just like, this is just crazy to me, you know?
Yeah.
And it's sad because that fight would have been amazing. That would have been a good way to go out.
Yeah, that would have been a great one, especially where they were at in their careers and everything.
And the fight was in Albuquerque. And they used to be teammates. Like, dude, it's just like a great way to end the career. Like, you've gotten everything that you wanted in this last fight. Like, the fight should have happened and just didn't. You know what I mean?
It definitely seems like a lot of times it kind of felt like almost like an ego trip for Joshua.
Yeah.
Like he was just kind of like slapping around Diego, and like he kind of like
for sure.
He kind of like took control of him, you know? So
I think that's what makes it disgusting. You know, you look at it, you're like, dude, this guy's one, he's not qualified to be training Diego Sanchez.
And he's really just trying to, like, a lot of those clips, like, it just looks like he's trying to hurt him.
Yeah.
Like, it doesn't look like he's trying
For his own ego.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It doesn't look like he's trying to help him at all.
No, not at all. And so I think that's what made the whole situation disgusting. I do like, I listened to Anthony Smith, who's a UFC fighter. He's a light heavyweight. He was talking to Dana when this is right after the clip came out of, you know, him being hung upside down, getting punched by Fabia. And the UFC had split from, you know, the Cerrone fight and from Diego, and was like, hey, we're not going to make that fight happen. Like, here you go. This is it for you. We'll get you out of your contract. Do whatever you want in your life. Anthony Smith was like, hey, called Dana and literally said, like, you know, it's clear that Fabia has control of Diego. Like, that's not Diego. And Dana said, watch Fabia take all of his money and ruin him. And he's like, and I'll be here to pick up the pieces for Diego. And like, I thought that was big because Dana, at that point, does Dana really owe? Dana's aware enough to know that it's not necessarily Diego anymore, you know?
Yeah.
Like, it's this master manipulator who has weaseled his way into this situation. And I think it just showed a lot. Like, Dana had so much respect for Diego and what he's done that even though he doesn't necessarily owe him anything, he's still going to help him and acknowledge that he's going to help him when it all comes falling down. And that's exactly what happened.
Yeah.
And I just thought that was a big move from Dana. That showed Dana's character and a side of Dana that most people don't get to see, and not a side of Dana that's really talked about. You know what I mean? I think people always look at the bad side of Dana, and Dana gets a lot of credit or gets a lot of shit. And I think that showed, like, you know, Dana's got a good heart.
Well, especially too, like, we got to remember where the UFC came from, and like without that Ultimate Fighter season going the way that it did, like the UFC wouldn't be here.
True.
So Diego's definitely kind of like one of the poster childs of like the people that helped revitalize the whole thing. Like, people always remember Forrest Griffin and we remember Stephan Bonner, but people don't talk about Diego in the same light. And I feel like he's equally like right there in the mix, you know?
Yeah.
Him and Kenny Florian.
I think maybe that is only because his fight with Kenny Florian only was about a minute long, or it was in the first round, and Diego was so dominant. That Stephan Bonner fight in Forrest, obviously a war, and that's the fight that everybody's like, oh, that saved the UFC. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
So I think that's why maybe that he's not in that same conversation, but he is equally as important. You know, he was kind of that like quirky guy on the show who was like doing yoga at random times, and I think there's literally a scene where there's like a lightning storm. You know, and he's like trying to get energy from the lightning storm. Like, he's sitting there in Zen, like every time like the thunder happens and the lightning strikes, like he's like getting energy from it. So like, just a quirky personality, and but like a hell of a fighter.
Yeah.
And a really exciting fighter too. Like, his style, like, he just comes at you and he looks to break you. And I think he's equally as important as, you know, like Stephan Bonner or Forrest Griffin for sure.
I just wish that he didn't open his wallet chakra.
Dude, the wallet chakra. I mean, he took Fabia's hook, line, and sinker for sure, which is you know.
But I also feel like people are always like, oh, how could he fall for something like that? People fall for cults all sorts of
time. Shit. Yeah. And I think he had previously had fallen for like a Ponzi scheme at one point. And I think maybe if Fabia did his homework, he probably did. He probably saw that and saw where Diego was in his career and was like, this is where I'm gonna.
And a lot of people do. Like, my wife loves this show called One Tree Hill. This is like
I've heard of it.
You heard of it?
I've heard of One Tree Hill.
So there was a girl that acted on that.
Okay.
And she lost all of her money because she was in like a cult, and they would take her money and they would give her like basically like
little pieces,
an allowance.
Yeah, of that
and then
money.
they just like spent it all. So she lost like everything from that show.
Fuck.
So it's like you can see like that happens. And then there's that freaking club that Joe Rogan was going to buy. That it ended up being like a house where there was a cult and the guy was doing the same shit. This stuff happens all the time.
Yeah,
you know?
all the
So
time.
You just got to be like mentally aware of your situation and be aware that there are snakes.
Yeah, there's people who are trying to take what you have that you've worked so hard for and take advantage of you ultimately. Especially, and I think in Diego's case, Diego was in a position of vulnerability. You know, his career's not going good. He's divorced, just got divorced. Doesn't really know what he's going to do. It's a perfect time to, you know, take advantage of something like that. And I think that's exactly what happened.
It's always like, it's always during turmoil that the biggest changes happen. You know,
Always.
I don't think we've ever talked to anybody about.
I don't think we have.
These are, so if you've ever watched one of the videos so far, well, one, because we've done one.
We've done one here.
But I have these pieces right here. I know it looks just like a piece of chalk, but
with some rainbow colors on it, but it's a lot more than that.
On it. But these are some pieces from the Berlin Wall. So
Crazy.
It is kind of funny to think like just the way that everything happened there too. It's very similar. Like they were in turmoil from the Treaty of Versailles and their whole economy tanked. And then if it wasn't for that, you probably wouldn't have had the Nazis.
Mm-hmm.
And then after that, you wouldn't have had the overthrow. And it's funny because this side is from the Western side. So the chalk is there because there was kids that would play because that was the side that we controlled.
Oh, okay,
so they
gotcha.
had, like democracy and everything. So
Right.
Kids would play. They would write little like drawings on the wall and stuff. Like it was just kind of like something that they grew up around.
Yeah.
Meanwhile, people were just getting murdered on the other side trying to get out.
Yeah.
So it's definitely like that happens a lot.
Yeah.
And we saw that happen
at a
with
much
this
larger
story.
scale.
At a much larger scale.
In Berlin, but yeah, for sure.
But it can happen on a personal level very easily.
Absolutely.
You know?
Absolutely. Yeah. I think it's one of those things that we all say like, oh my gosh, like how, like I'm saying it, how could somebody fall for something like that? Especially once Diego got to a point where like he knows what good training is, he knows what good coaches are, but when you're in a state of like vulnerability and you're willing to do anything to get back to where you were, I think you're not looking at things through a clear lens. I think that's exactly what happened.
And people are moving away from you too.
Yeah.
Yeah. When people start to pull away from you, you start grasping at straws.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. And I think that's exactly what happened. I think I'll always be a huge Diego Sanchez fan. But yeah, the fight with Clay Guida and then his fight with Nick Diaz. If you guys have never watched Diego Sanchez fight, the two fights that I would go watch is one, the Clay Guida fight, because it's insane. And then the Nick Diaz fight is the fight that really like kind of catapulted his career. Like Nick was already established. Everybody knew who Nick was. Like Nick was the bad boy, you know what I mean, of the UFC. He's just this, character.
I'm assuming that was before he got suspended for the marijuana stuff.
Oh yeah. This is way before. And Diego is obviously he won the one tough season, but he hasn't really like proven himself yet. Against like stiff competition, like nobody like Kenny. He ran through Kenny Florian, but in the Nick Diaz fight, he faces some a guy who fights back and is at his level, and he like handled it very, very well, and it was a great fight. So I think if there's two fights to watch, those are the two that I would pick. But it just showed who Diego Sanchez is.
Do we know what kind of happened to his career after he got out of the UFC?
Yeah, so Diego, crazy. So he had one more MMA fight with Kevin Lee at Eagle FC. Khabib had his promotion Eagle FC for one event. I think it was in Florida, and he lost that fight to Kevin Lee. And then after that, BKFC had him fight Austin Trout in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which was huge. And he lost that fight as well. And I think after that, I think everybody realized and I think Diego realized like it's time. You know what I mean? But when you've done so much in the sport and like you feel so powerful at your best, you feel like you can just continue to go. You know what I mean? And I think he realized though that like he's no longer quite in his prime, and but he had just such a legendary career. You know what I mean? And he will always be. He's kind of a pioneer. He's definitely a pioneer. I think he's definitely owed his respect as one of those guys who like really made the UFC happen. So I think he definitely earns a spot in history books.
Definitely.
Yeah.
I think it's that's another way you'd have to look at it too, is it's like when you look at fighting, I always kind of equate it to like football.
Yeah.
Because like you think of football, like they play like 18 games a year or 17 games a year.
Right.
So it's so many, but then we were thinking about like just where you're at in your career, and then like the average when people retire around like maybe like 37, somewhere around there. So like if you average out like maybe 3 fights a year is like a good year. A decent amount of fights.
Right.
Like you're talking about like in the 20s.
Yeah.
So like every fight's like so precious.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think it's more, at least today, it's more and more precious in the beginning, of your career, because you're not getting a big shot at the UFC unless you do really well. Like every fight in the beginning is like your most important fight. And until you get to the UFC and establish yourself in the UFC, every fight's going to be like that. I think now more than ever, like if you're a up and coming prospect who's just like, maybe you're fighting on the Ultimate Fighter like I did, or you're fighting on the Contender Series, like every fight before then and that fight is the most important fight of your life. I think Diego got to a point where, like, I think it might have happened after, I would say probably after the Nick Diaz fight or the Clay Guida fight. Like he's established in the UFC, right from there. Like he put himself in a category where he knew he was going to get more opportunity. You know what I mean? Like you feel like your value is so high that the UFC is not just going to let you go. You know what I mean? Like you're going to have more opportunity, and that's rare in fighting. Usually you're kind of like, when's my next fight going to be? Am I going to come back? Am I going to get the opportunity? But like once you have some what's the word? Reassurance. Like, then I think guys fight differently too when they have reassurance. Like, hey, I'm going to be back here. Like a Justin Gaethje. You know what I mean? Like he's fought in so many crazy fights. I think after the UFC, after his first fight with Michael Johnson and maybe one fight after that, he probably felt like, dude, I have financial and I know financial freedom. And then I also know that the UFC's they're going to have me back just by the way I fight. I've proven that to them. So I think that's what all of us young fighters strive for, is just like that opportunity and to be in that point of our career where it's like, hey, like, I know I'm going to get another opportunity after this. You know what I mean? I'm going to have that security because it's rare.
What would you say to like somebody, like there's obviously fighters that we know that go on a little bit of like a skid.
Yeah.
And you lose like 2 or 3 fights in a row. What's kind of like the way back from there?
Man, I think
it must just feel like it's like the end of the world. Cause you got to kind of like start your streak over. You think you got to at least win as many as you lost on the skid, or you think you got to go more?
I don't know. I think it matters where you are. I think if you're a young fighter who's outside the UFC, it's much different if you go on a skid, because you got to win. You got to win 2 times that. I like to say for every loss, you got to win 3 fights to be considered in the UFC. Like that's just the hard truth. And that's tough for people to hear. But that's what the UFC wants. They want good records. They want guys that are solid. You know what I mean? And so I think if you're a young fighter, you got to be really honest with yourself. You got to be your worst critic. You got to look at yourself in the mirror and be like, is it something that I'm doing? Is it my lifestyle? Is it the way I'm training? Is it the coaches that I'm around? Is it outside the gym? Is it outside life things that are causing me not to be able to perform? Am I taking the right fights? Like there's so many things that it could be, but you have to just be really honest with yourself, and you got to be selfish. It's fighting. Like you're the one in there. Like if you're going to make this a career, you've got to be selfish with your time, who you keep around you, and the decisions you make, because you only have so much time. You know what I mean? So that would be my advice to young fighters. I think guys that are already in the UFC and they have a little skid, dude, the fans, they're, what is it? They have a short-term memory loss. You know what I mean? Like you might go on a 2-fight skid, but then you go out there and knock somebody out. They don't even remember those 2 fights. You know what I mean? So a guy who's like already in the UFC, I feel like they're in a much better position than the young fighter. They just got to go out there and perform their ass off one time, and all that shit before is forgotten about. You know what I mean? It's
like Charles Oliveira is a really good example.
Super good. Oh, that's the best example you could have said right there. Best
Dude,
example.
Like you kind of see him quit out. In a couple of those there, and you think like, oh, he's done.
He's done.
And then he just comes back with a vengeance.
Yeah.
Dyes the hair blonde.
Change it. And he made some like, he was honest with himself. You know what I mean? I think he had some of those losses and he's like, you know what? I'm just not showing up at 145. It's time to go up. And that really, like, I think people were like, dude, there's no way he's going to do good at a bigger weight class with bigger, stronger guys. And he's done exceptional, And so, and I'm sure there's other things in his life going on where he made a change. And maybe that was the reason why he had the success. But I do think he was like, hey, like, I'm just not performing well at this weight. I'm strung out. I feel like shit all the time. I'm going to go up.
But he's such a lengthy guy.
Yeah.
That I feel like it would be different if he was like Pantoja's size and then tried to move up.
Yeah.
But he was so big for that weight class.
Right. That
moving up there, like it really didn't change the way that he matched up with a lot of different people.
Yeah. No, I agree. I think maybe he had people telling him that, you got to fight at this weight class or you got to cut weight this certain way. Maybe he was cutting weight. I don't know. If we asked him, I wonder what he would say. Like if I asked him, hey, were you cutting weight the wrong way at 145? Now that you're at 155, I wonder what his answer would be. You know what I mean? Because only he really knows.
He's definitely one of those guys that look like death whenever he had a weight cut.
Yeah. And I mean, now at 155, he looks like death, but he looks good. Like he performs good. So I wonder what his answer would be to that question.
Yeah. It's like Ilya too.
Ilya,
Like,
man,
like,
Ilya
you
is.
see like his face. Like,
Oh, yeah.
at 45.
Well, that's
like,
why
you can
he-
see his cheekbones and everything. Like his cheeks are all sunken in.
And I think he realized like he's not making that weight anymore. That's why he gave up the belt. And now you got Volkanovski versus Lopez next weekend,
That'll
and
be a really interesting one.
that's going to be a really good fight.
That's one of those guys that I love right now is Diego Lopez.
He's
just the way he came in, because that's kind of proof. Like, you don't even necessarily need to win like the first fight that you have, because obviously he lost against that Russian guy. What is it? Aliskerov? Evloev?
I think it's Evloev.
One of those guys. And dang, dude,
Probably botching the name so bad.
He
but
almost got him with that freaking knee bar, dude.
Yeah, or the armbar. I think it was an armbar.
No, I think it was a leg.
Oh, was
He
it?
was stretching the leg, and it was right when time expired.
Oh, okay.
I'm pretty sure people
Tell us whether we're wrong. I knew at one point he had an armbar in the fight, and then he obviously almost knocked the guy out a couple times.
that was such a good fight, though.
Yeah, but think about it. Like his story is great too, because he's only been in the UFC. He loses his first UFC fight. He fights the number 10 guy in the world in his debut, which is crazy enough. And then a year later, he's fighting for the UFC belt.
Yeah.
He's only been in the UFC a year. Like, that just shows you, like, this game is crazy, bro. Things can happen so quickly, and people can forget about your losses. Like him. In his debut, he loses the number 10 guy, but he looked so good in that fight, and nobody thought he was going to even really be in the fight because he took it on short notice, fighting the number 10 guy in the world, and he puts on a good performance. The UFC looks at that like, oh, this is the guy we want, and then he goes on the streak that he went on.
Yeah.
And now he's fighting for the belt a year later.
I think that's too, like, there's definitely like different philosophies in the UFC. Like, I bet you he probably wasn't the first guy that they asked for that fight.
Probably not.
There was probably some guys in the top 25, that they asked.
Yeah.
And they were like, no, like, at this point in my career, like, I need to build up a little bit more. I don't know if I'm ready for this.
Right.
Whereas he was like,
I'll take it.
Any given night.
Yeah. Yeah. And those are the opportunities you got to be able to capitalize on. When you're one of those guys who's on the list, who's like, hey, the UFC can call you at any time, and you might have to fight on 3 days notice, 4 days, 5 days. You got to say, yeah, you got to be ready for that opportunity. And he was ready for that opportunity. And he might not have got the outcome that he wanted, but he proved to the UFC he definitely belongs in the UFC. And it was a good opportunity for him.
What do you think happens?
Man, I really wouldn't. I'll say this first. I would not bet on this fight.
Yeah.
I think there's too much. I would say if the fight ends in the first 2 rounds, I think Lopez is knocking him out, because Lopez is he comes out vicious, like right from the bell. He's a fast starter, and he's just got good combinations, and he's just ruthless. You know what I mean?
He's very well rounded too.
Very well rounded. But I think his well-roundedness allows him to, he doesn't give a fuck. He's coming forward, and he kind of throws the fuel on the fire for himself. He's like, let me dump this fuel on this fire, and I'll run through it, and let's see what happens. And he's able to do that because he's so confident, because he has all the skills. I think Volkanovski's a little bit of a more Volk's a little bit of a slower starter, and he's a little bit more technical. If it goes past rounds 4 and 5, I'm going to say the fight starts to steer Volk's way, just because he has that championship experience. But that's it. Like, the fight could go either way. I think they're both easily. I think they're definitely skilled the same. Like, they both have the same level of skill.
Yeah, I kind of feel bad for Volk a little bit, because I feel like regardless, like, even if he wins this fight, like, people are going to give him a lot of shit because he's winning the belt back after a bunch of people are leaving,
because of Ilya,
and Holloway, and like that kind of weight class is kind of restructuring right now around like their whole ranked kind of area.
I think it's just the times. Like, times are changing. I think Ilya's young, but he's just too big, and then Max is getting older. Volk's getting older, so it's kind of like, I think, will people always give, if Volk goes out there and wins this fight, I think, will people always give him crap? Yeah, but there's always going to be critics, man. Like, I think everybody knows that too. Like, there's always going to be critics, but if Volk goes out there and dominates, I don't think many, and then Ilya goes up, I don't think people are really going to, remember. MMA fans have short-term memory loss. That's really what's going on. So I think he goes out there and wins that fight, and he becomes a champ, if he defends the belt too, I think he's like one of the best featherweights of all time.
And then he'll just be cooking out there in the wilderness with the belt.
Have you watched the countdown?
You know what's? No, I haven't.
Dude, you should watch. He's got like a farm now, like out in the middle of nowhere. He's wearing like one of those safari hats, like driving his kids on like ATVs out in the middle of nowhere, Australia. It's really cool.
So dope.
He's literally out there in the middle of nowhere.
Yeah, it was funny. Tom
his best
asked when I was talking about like his cooking channel's been going so well,
good. Yeah,
that, like people don't realize that he's a fighter.
Oh really?
Like,
oh my
they just
gosh!
think he's like a dude that cooks on YouTube, and then they're like, "Oh shit, what?"
That's funny, dude. That's funny. That's just like good. The kitty, Jet. All right, Jet. No, that's just like he's been consistent with that channel, and he's been able to like build that so much to the point where people literally don't know he's a fighter.
Yeah,
just shows the power of social media. Jet's like, I'm tired of you talking.
I think that's about time to wrap it up.
Sure. Yeah, absolutely.
Well, thanks for coming out again.
Hey.
I know you had a long drive.
No problem, dude.
It was probably a little bit shorter this time, though, right?
This time much shorter.
Maybe like
no
30.
traffic like last time. This was easy.
Yeah, I do like the kind of like the morning routine a little bit though too. So
Yeah, for sure.
I feel like it's a little bit.
I could get used to your coffee and coming over and chatting with you. So.
Yeah, well, I got plenty of that. So
Sounds good.
all right, everybody, thanks for tuning in
have a
for
good one.
another episode
On the Fighter One podcast.